All right, hello, this is Krista with the lifeinprogress.ca, and I'm here with three of the brave and beautiful women from my membership community. We're here today to talk about fear and what that can look like or how it shows up in our life, and more importantly, how do we stop waiting to feel like fearless and just show up to life through the fear, through the discomfort, through uncertainty, through even like comparison, perfectionism, like whatever shows up, how fear tends to show up in our lives. So if you're watching this, you might be on my YouTube page. If you are and you want more resources around this topic, I encourage you to head over to alifeinprogress.ca. I have a resource page for you there. Many courses, communities where you can, or even one-on-one work where you can learn to practice this in your own life. But anyways, a few of the, Deb and Sandra and Katrina have agreed to be with us here online for this very informal chat to talk about this idea of how we're all learning and practicing showing up afraid in our own lives. All right, so welcome you guys formally, because I've already said hello. All right, so, and Katrina is intentionally off camera, just, you know, if you're watching, that wasn't a mistake, it's intentional. All right, so you all have been with me and my work and maybe my writing for varying amounts of time. But whether you've been with me for 3 months or 3 years or whatever, you probably have recognized that fear is a common theme in my work. It's not a fancy topic. It's not one that people always want to click on, but it's actually incredibly important. And it's not like all of us will experience fear because we're, you know, human in a messy world. And one of the things that I often push back against in my own work is how we reduce the complexities of life to these sort of like sound bites, like cheerful, feel-good sound bites. And I'm not somebody who has ever resonated with the idea of living fearless, like as though someday we're going to arrive and we're not going to feel stress or fear or discomfort anymore. I actually call BS on that. I just don't think there's a way of escaping that in this world. And I think that for me, what I want this to mostly do, this video, this chat together, is to help other people realize that maybe you've been waiting for the wrong thing. Like maybe you keep waiting to live because you think one day I'm going to know who I am fully. I'm going to have no fear. I'm going to be confident. One day my life is going to feel orderly and pulled together and I'm going to be on top of it all. One day, you know. And I think when we do that, we forget to live. And so for me, on a very personal level, as somebody who has struggled with a lot of fear, like huge amounts of fear, it has been a pivotal thing to the way that I have found, you know, comfort in my own body, the way that I have felt healthy in my relationships, the way that I've been able to build a business I love, or even to stay whole in the midst of tragedy. It's this idea of learning to stop waiting for life to be perfect and comfortable and learn that actually I have what it takes to show up afraid. I show up through fear. So that's my big introduction. So to get us started, in my you guys know, and other people won't know necessarily, that often I use a sort of a structure to introduce a topic and get us like thinking about it in new ways and then practicing. And those three kind of pillars are self-awareness, self-compassion, which includes mindfulness and mindset, and then learning to take imperfect action. And that's really like where we practice, right? So all the theory in the world, all the self-help books in the world will never change our lives. We have to actually like practice, get our hands dirty. So we'll sort of loosely use that framework as we chat today. So why don't we just start with the idea of self-awareness, which might include things like just our basic wiring, our personalities, maybe trauma we experienced as a child. Like there's all these different pieces of life and of who we are that kind of impact how we show up to the world. And so would you guys start by sharing, what have you learned about yourself? If you think about what did you learn in this sort of bucket of self-awareness that has helped you begin changing your perspective or your approach, or brought new freedom and joy even in this idea of learning to show up through fear to your life? Anybody want to volunteer to start? Okay, should I narrow it down? Would it be helpful?
Yes. That's a big top. I mean, I'm like, whoa, okay.
All right. Sure. So would you share a little bit about your personal experience with fear? Just start there. Like, let's say a minute, like not a whole history, but let's just start by talking about how fear has impacted us individually, maybe, and then we'll kind of flow from there. Is anybody willing to start?
I can jump in on that one.
Okay.
So I may or may not be particular in this area, but I have spent most of my life perceiving myself as fearless.
Interesting.
And the reason was because I just was so disconnected from emotion that I didn't feel the fear. So I used to be described as the kind of person who would, jump in where angels fear to tread, took risks because I wasn't even connected to body or, and it wasn't until maybe 5-10 years ago where a good therapist kind of gently pulled me into a place of awareness. And I'm like, okay. So my experience of fear has been lack thereof, flooded with fear and anxiety. And that's where I've learned how to show up through fear, because I wouldn't be able to do anything. So it's like this weird, complete lack of experience. And then, now I'm going to have to learn to deal with it.
That's so interesting, Sandra. And it does make me think, though, how I think I know a lot of us are disconnected in different ways. Like, some of us may be more in tune with body, where we always know where anxiety lives in our body, but we may not necessarily be seeing all the ways that we hide, abandon ourselves, avoid, suppress, like all of those things. And so that really is a really key part of this work, is that self-awareness, is what's up in my body, what's up in my life, in my mind. Without that awareness, and even beginning to put out little shoots of awareness in appropriate situations, right? So sometimes we need professional therapy, like professional support. We need, sometimes we can do this work on our own, or in a class or something. But yeah, that's it's fascinating how we learn to self-protect in this world. So
the primary message in my home growing up was, don't be a problem. Just don't be a problem. Don't make mommy mad. Don't make mommy angry. Don't. So I learned really early that no one would be there, and if I express needs, I would be shamed for having them. So I learned I have learned I'm a very, very resilient and adaptive creature. So I learned to just shut everything down, send it, way deep. And unpacking that has been challenging. But it is interesting to talk to people who have known me for decades, and they're like, oh my goodness, you're not fearful, you're not anxious, and I'm like,
Right. Yeah. So also, that's another interesting point, is how, I was also somebody who was very high functioning, so to speak, when I would try to express the truth of how I felt, sometimes I felt like I was dying inside, but people would say, oh, but you're so this and you're so that. And I'm like, but you're not hearing me. Like, my ability to be organized and orderly and on top of things doesn't mean I'm not dying inside. Like, so it's so interesting. And again, the more we do our own work to kind of really become self-aware, the more we can do that for other people, right? Like, we don't just, we see beyond that exterior, and we know, because we know that we all have a shadow, we all have stuff, we all have, you know, behind the facade. So, and not in a judgmental way, but actually a very compassionate way, right? The more we see who we are and how we are and why, and then start practicing self-compassion, which is that next part, then we can offer that to the world around us. So Deb or Katrina, do you want to dive in and share a bit? Deb, I think you, or did I make that up? Was that you? I was pretty sure I saw you, like, me, pick me.
Yeah. I can really resonate with what Sandra was saying. My home, you had to be invisible as a child. And if you did something wrong, that was bringing attention, and not always in a good way.
Mm.
And you learn to be a perfectionist. My mother even went as far as measuring how far apart things should be with her fingers, and that's how I had to take and have it. So yes, the perfectionist problem, I'm still recovering, but I think I've loosened up over the years, and my family has been surprised at how much I have been able to let go and lower the standards, lower the bar. And also a fear of lack. It was always a big fear in our house. My parents still have canned food from the 70s, you know, that don't want to give it away because we might need it. Yeah. So at this point in time, with my husband's business that he is involved in, they just last week had to let 32 people go, and he had to take a pay cut. So there's that scarcity fear coming up again. And but yet we gotta live, you know. So those are two of the biggest ones that I struggle with, and trying to keep a balance is very difficult. But Krista has taught us lots of things. That brain dump sheet, you know, is my friend, and the think this, not that type situation, any of those worksheets. And the Enneagram has really been something that I've had interest in since we touched the subject a little while back. And now things are making sense why I do what I do.
Yeah, I love the Enneagram for that, for sure. So Deb, you mentioned perfectionism and fear of lack. And so, you know, it's another topic that it's interesting. It's a recurring theme in my work and in my like one-on-one work. Yet people, they struggle to really see the truth of how much perfectionism plays out in their lives. Many people think, oh, I'm not a perfectionist because my house is messy. And it's like, no, but that's like, we have this very limited scope, and it actually is so freeing when we start to see, oh no, here it is. At the roots of it is fear. And this is how it's infiltrating my life, my relationships, the work I want to do, etc. So yeah, learning that, deepening the roots of self-awareness around that can be powerful. My husband is an immigrant and grew up with very little. I mean, it would be fit, you know, there are people in worse circumstances than him, but you know, we would certainly consider that an impoverished experience. And he definitely, my dad too, actually grew up in poverty, with an alcoholic father, a mother trying to hold together a whole big crew of kids, and a lot of fear. And I see the lack part. I see how that played out in both of their lives. And to me, to a lesser extent in that, like, I'm more willing to spend money on experiences like good food and good art supplies for my kids and things like that. But anyways, we sort of grapple with that. But I like that we're just bringing up some different ideas, because other people might just hear that and it might just spark them and say, oh, okay, yeah, that's me, or that's my partner, or that's my child, whatever. But one of the things, Deb, that you said about learning to live, like, it's like we still have to live. I find that really challenging. And that's where perfectionism actually can really take root, is like, when we're looking for security, safety and security, we can forget to make space for both and, right? So it's like, we have to save all the money. We can't spend at all because what if? And then, but what if we also give a little wiggle room, My parents both died fairly young from cancer. And that's something that I have, especially since my dad's death, more and more realized. It's like, my perfectionism can tip me into all or nothing. So to be safe and secure, I might have to stay on top of my home perfectly, or can't spend any money on fun, because what if the next bad thing happens? But since losing them both, it's like, but I may not even get a one day. Like that, here's a reality, and I want to live. I want to bring some of these beautiful parts of my life vision into my today. I don't want to wait for all of it. And so that loosening up and figuring out how can we make space for both, and then even kind of like allowing ourselves to tip a little bit. So maybe here we do tip into experiences and stuff, and enjoying some pleasures of life, and then we move into a lean period. And in both cases, we know I'm resilient. I'm okay here. It's not forever. And it's a lot of work, isn't it? Like a lot of emotional work, a lot of hard stretching work, but there's a lot of freedom. And I think I see that with, I can't physically see Katrina, your face right now. Just like, generally speaking, what I see is like sparks of delight and hope and possibility. And like, even as we're practicing and we're each doing this hard work in our own lives, what I love is when we get to see, like when I love in my work, when I get to see the little sparks where it's like, in the middle of the hard work, there's joy. In the middle of it, there's, a new idea. Like Deb, you were referring to some worksheets and some tools I use in my work. And all they're really doing, I think, is making some space in our brains and our hearts for a little bit of new possibility, right? Because we don't always know how to do that for ourselves, or else we would have already done it. So it's just like sometimes having somebody else to say, but what about this? And you're like, what? I'm allowed to think that? I have permission? So I love that. And that is definitely one of the benefits, I think, of a group scenario. Like, I really do value one-on-one work. It's very intimate, more vulnerable, but there is definitely a gift in seeing each other kind of go through this together. Katrina, are you ready to jump in and share a bit about how fear has kind of played out in your life?
Sure. I guess I don't know that I would term it fear, but it might be. I think that I relate a lot to what everyone said so far. And I think over the past couple of years, I would never before have said that I was a perfectionist, because I don't need things always to be tidy. I don't need this. I don't need that. I can deal with a certain amount of flex in situations. But as I kind of look back on my life, I think, oh yeah, but you have trouble making decisions if you're not 100% sure that it's the right one. And in the gray area, which is so much of real life and like personal, knowing yourself kind of, I think I think that's a space where perfectionism really, like, I am just paralyzed. It's very hard for me to make a decision if I'm not very, very sure. And anybody who's ever traveled with me will tell you I am capable of planning us down to, like, you know, the 15-minute mark. And I've learned that it's not very fun to travel that way. There's no room for magic. So it's funny, the areas where, like, my workspace right now is fairly messy. Doesn't really bother me. Maybe tomorrow it'll bother me and I'll clean it up. But I think I would never have thought that was something that was operating in me. And then kind of listening to different people's stories and different ways that it comes up for people. I've noticed, oh yeah, I do have a bit of perfectionism, and it's okay to admit that, so that I can see where, like, the skill sets I have of planning serve me and where they just tire me out, you know, and it almost makes conflict, because not everybody wants that amount of structure, and that's okay, you know? And I think when people were talking about their families, I was thinking about the family I grew up in. I would say on average is very highly functioning and always helping people. And for me, there were a lot of good things about that, but one of the problems was just kind of being able to need to be helped too. Kind of more of the give and take, like, when you need help, is it okay to ask, and not totally feeling like it was. Like, I think in some ways it was, and in other ways it wasn't. And so there are times in my life that have been difficult that I kind of haven't known how to reach out and get the help. And that has been a really difficult thing for me. And that I'm kind of still working through. And so those are the two things that came up for me when you guys were chatting.
Thank you. I feel like you kind of what you shared, even as an example, realizing, even though you're still practicing this, like, that it's okay for you to actually also receive help, right? That I feel like that's a really nice sort of transition into the topic, or that thread or pillar of self-compassion, because that's what you're doing really, is you're recognizing, hey, I'm human. Mm-hmm. So why is it that, you know, of course, if I see the value in other people getting support, why am I excluding myself from this? Treating yourself, you know, with self-kindness, and just really even staying mindful to, you know, how you are even in the moment, right? So today I'm okay with this messier space because I'm choosing to focus somewhere else, right? And tomorrow I may pour myself into just tidying this up. Both, like, it's not a judgment of character. And so let's move into this idea. So just for people watching, like, I have a lot of resources that focus on, like, self-compassion, or focus on resilience, or focus on a specific idea, but it's also all kind of tangled up together. But just super briefly, Kristen Neff, who's one of the leading researchers in the field of self-compassion, says that self-compassion has 3 key components. So number 1, self-kindness. So that might be, that can look like our self-care, receiving help. It might look like our self-talk, like there's a lot of different parts of it. Second is mindfulness. It's that we have to practice this skill of noticing in the moment, creating a pause between impulse and response. So that might look like, say, if Sandra, her instinct is dive on in without even examining, her pause might be like, oh, hey, I'm noticing what's happening, how that's feeling in my body, what's running through my brain right now, and is this what I want? Or can I create a little bit of a space to just examine and then choose what I actually want? And then third is common human. Oh, and so mindfulness does also include mindset work. So Deb referred to that. Was there anything I wanted to say? I feel like I'm missing a word I wanted. No, I think that's it. And then common humanity. The third component of self-compassion is common humanity. And that's where we really realize, like we're just human. There is no shame in being human. And I feel like maybe all of us actually touched on this, whether we use the word or not, but shame is huge. Shame is what will keep us hiding, performing, suppressing, etc. And when we can embrace this idea of common humanity, all of a sudden we're free to just feel, to be messy, to be in progress without judgment. And so is there anything, could you offer, and I'll present two different ideas. One, what have you learned, or what are you practicing right now in this area of self-compassion? Like, that's keeping you remembering that you're worth, you're worth doing this work, that you are worthy right now in the middle of whatever is happening in your life or body or whatever, or that, something that keeps you on the path of building a life that you want to live in. So it could be like, what are you practicing right now that's helping you in this area? Or it could be, what would you tell your younger self? One thing that or maybe it's hard for you to think about that, but maybe there's a younger person in your life who you adore, a grandson, a sister, a best friend, whatever, a niece. And what's one thing that would have helped you and that you would offer somebody else who's listening? Does that feel clear enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can go.
Katrina, yeah, go ahead.
I think the concept of I am enough is something that I don't know if I'll ever stop working on it, just because I think it holds so much. But you posted kind of like a pretty, what do you call it? Like a visual. And I've put that on the front of my binder that I do the work in for this group. And that's encouraging. And I think in general, like a lot of times if I'm just feeling discouraged, or I'm feeling like I just don't, I don't know what to do next, or I'll get in kind of like a shame spiral. Sometimes I'll just like go onto your page and read one of your articles, Krista, and it just reminds me like, it's okay. Everybody feels this way sometimes. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. It's okay. You're enough as you are. And if you want to today or tomorrow or another day, you can make another step forward, and you can take a small action, and that's enough. And so I think the combination of just the grounding of you're enough and kind of the small actions for me is super helpful, because sometimes I orchestrate a whole thing that I have to do, and I need to do like 90 minutes of yoga today, and that's what's going to make my back feel good, and this and that and da 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 da. And then I'm like, but I don't have that in me today. So maybe I can do 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And if I have the energy to keep going, I can, but that's enough. 15 or 30 is enough. So I guess for me, that's the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. I'll share, Katrina. I'm so grateful that I have some pretty good, like that I really do love myself well. I raise the bar on myself all the time. I still have a very strong inner critic. Like I'm very much I'm going to be practicing forever. Like I just don't believe that we ever stop practicing. But this is so personal, but it's just another part of real life and common humanity is like, in grief, dealing with trauma, I have these panic attacks, and I still keep showing up. And at the end, like I'm just thinking of last night, I actually got a lot of great stuff done. But for me, great stuff done can also look like sitting in the sun, soaking in the sunshine, going to get colorful veggies from the local farm, but at night, I just remind myself, I am so proud of you, Krista. You know what? You showed up. Like, I'm serious. Like, I just practice this because my inner critic can take me out fast, because these panic attacks are so hard, because I can feel like my to-do list just is never ending, because, I'm dealing with trauma. But so I just continually remind myself that was enough. You did a great job. If you did 5 minutes of stretching, I'm proud of you. So for me, I I think, you know, I guess I would love to just reinforce that for other people is you do 5 minutes, celebrate that. Cheer yourself onward like your own best friend, because like this world can feel hard, and you don't have to be in crises to know that this world can feel hard, right? Like we're doing this in the time of COVID-19 where, you know, stuff is happening. But yeah, I love that. And then imperfect action, just like small steps. And yeah, and then, but for me, it's like an interesting loop. It's like we take an action, we practice self-compassion. We take an action, we practice self-compassion. They have to go together. So thank you, Katrina. Anybody else?
Well, oh, Deb.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Mm-mm. Deb.
Well, I would say I would tell my younger self to relax. It's going to be okay. And I would take and say, be yourself. Don't hide it. Because it took over 10 years for my husband to find out I like country music, and he played rock and roll all the time. You know, things like that. I just had hidden away and wasn't myself. I was trying to be perfect. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the end. Life is way too short to be perfect. That's definitely what I would take and tell myself. Relax. It's going to be okay.
Deb, I have done a lot of work there too, where like for years I felt like I should be more feminine. Whatever, you know, like whatever the heck that means. And just all these like weird judgments and like things. And I really do think it's part of abandoning ourselves. Like Glennon Doyle I use that word a lot right now. It's from her current book, latest book, but I really like it because it feels true. Like we abandon ourselves in all sorts of ways. And, but they're harmful. Like they're so harmful, and it might seem inconsequential to just tell the truth about you. I really like country music. And then, you know, like it's freeing and it's beautiful, and it's hard because it sometimes means that we have to let go of some relationships where they won't allow us to be real, you know, whatever real means in this season of life. And yeah, but I one thing that I love is like when I see another woman, just like people in all different shapes and sizes and lived experiences, but when they're just being real, like trying to show up like just their quirky selves, their beautiful, like whatever that is, like it's like you meet spirit to spirit and you're like, I can just be. Yeah. How about you, Sandra?
Well, at first when you said, you know, like, what would I tell my younger self? I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to talk to my younger self. But then I realized that I do talk to younger people all the time. Not only my kids, but like when I was in Italy, that was kind of a role that I fell into, a mentor role. Because I was from outside the system and the culture, and it was we lived in this really small town where everybody knew each other forever. So there was all the, you know, the intricacies and backstories. And what I used to tell people all the time, and I truly believe it, is, you know, spend more time doing the things that make you glad to be alive. And I was really great at giving that advice. Not really great at taking that advice.
I think that's the mark of a teacher. Yeah. We have to learn to take our own advice as we dole it out.
Right. And it was, I've been following this online conference with Sounds True on trauma recovery. And I was listening to the work of Dr. Deb Dana. And she was talking about the fact of when we're either in sympathetic or dorsal, and we want to bring ourselves back to vagal, so it's, you know, polyvagal levels.
So she's referring to polyvagal theory, right? Around trauma.
Correct. but she was doing practical exercises. It was kind of cool. But she was talking about finding cues of safety and anchors. And all of a sudden, I realized that in part, that's what looking to things that make you feel alive is. Because when you feel like that, like for me, the finding things that make you feel alive is when the spirit just kind of bubbles up, and like it's like, Deb, you know, you hear this amazing country music song that just, and you're like, your toes are tapping.
And if
me,
I heard a country song, I'm like, ah, no. I live
like
in country music territory.
Yeah. For me, it's like listening to what I call beautiful, well, what Krista Tippett calls beautiful conversations, you know, with listening to people talk about ideas and learning. Like, for me, I'm just like, oh, wow. And then I realized that in and of itself for me is an anchor, and it is a way for me to kind of get above everything and remember that I'm human. Because it's way too easy for me to connect in my humanity, like on a lower level, to be like, oh yeah, they're just as bad as I am. That doesn't pull me out. I have to kind of experience the wonder, and that pulls me back. So.
I love that. You touched on so many beautiful, juicy ideas. And so I like to touch on this idea though, that, you know, so I love the way you framed that, and for you to be able to do that and notice all the tendencies requires self-awareness, self-compassion, you know, and then that you choose to act on that. So that imperfect action component. And sometimes like if in the beginning, if somebody, like, you know this, Sandra, but somebody who's listening may not, that when we start kind of doing some of this soul stretching work to really, you know, begin to figure out, who am I, you know, learn to love ourselves well and to build the lives we want. Sometimes we can get a little bit overwhelmed and stuck or mired in the place of only seeing what we perceive to be our faults, right? The base side, the shadow self, the old patterns. And that's where it can be really important. If you notice those tendencies in yourself, anybody listening, I highly recommend that you find somebody else who's safe to work with you, because they can, like somebody who's done their own work, right? So because they can help point out things. They can also remind you of your gifting, that you are not just the struggle, you are also strength, right? And so that is really important, to be able to see. And what you're expressing, Sandra, now, I'm assuming you're in a far healthier place as you continue to grow and work, like all of us. And that allows us to tell the truth about the hard stuff. Like, let's say we have we tendency towards addiction, a tendency towards numbing, etc. It's like, it's shame-free, because we're all here on this planet doing this work. So, but yeah, sometimes we need that outer perspective so that we don't sink in what we witness to be our messier parts or whatever. So, yeah. So, okay, let's end. I mean, there's so many beautiful topics. And again, I really encourage, like, anybody who does happen upon this video to know it is actually possible. It doesn't even matter where you're at in life. Like, literally, like, you could be 80. I have people in my community who are like 70s and 80s, and they write to me and they tell me about what they're learning from my courses, my writing, whatever, or just in their, you know, in their lives. And I find that incredibly inspiring. Like, there isn't a time limit on this. So wherever you are, I want you to know it is actually possible to find joy and freedom and purpose right here, like in the middle of your very imperfect life. You really can do this work. It's not dependent on, you know, location. It's not dependent on age. It's not dependent on even finances, because finances always help. Healthy environments always help. Like, of course they do, but we can always start somewhere. And just reach out. If you don't know where to start, send me an email, alifeinprogress@outlook.com. I will help you with whatever, if you need free like, there are amazing, beautiful tools out there. And so reach out if you don't know where to start. But I encourage you, just you don't have to wait to have your life all together. You can actually learn these things now. Okay. Can we go ahead?
I just wanted to jump in with another aspect of, I've spent a lot of time reassuring myself about sometimes fear doesn't look, sometimes courage doesn't look like, standing in the face of a roaring tiger. Sometimes it's getting up in the morning. As a person with a significant multi-layered trauma history, I would like to say to my younger self, or to anyone listening, that sometimes it's really helpful to remind yourself that the thing that most terrifies you already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this is a rule, but for trauma survivors, we can get activated by an echo of a situation that was. And so in those moments, it's really important just to center, to remind yourself, and there are a whole bunch of exercises you can do, just to reassure your mind, your body, your nervous system that the danger isn't present. And to me, that's a unique form of bravery, because the fear is real. I mean, your nervous system has no clue that what you're feeling isn't the tiger behind you about to chomp you whole. So I just wanted to add that's that fear is real, even if there isn't a present danger. So it's good to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Be compassionate.
Yeah, like when I write about fear, it's because it's visceral. It is strong. It is present. And in my case, it's also like, it's not make believe. Like, some people say, oh, it's all like, it's like, no, like, I actually I'm in one of my worst fears, losing a child. Like, what? Like, and you can't, and I've buried a lot of people, like, you can't tell me that these things aren't real. Like, I walked through some stuff, and also sometimes it's the echo of, like, I love the way that you expressed that, but also, yeah, it's like, this isn't easy. Like, I think that's what I always want to say is, like, sometimes, like, even in a blog post, it might seem like, oh, like, this is all pretty. It's like, no, this is like blood and sweat on the page. Like, it's like it's hard to express, but like, if and also you can learn to stay grounded. You can learn to feel that and to say, I hear you, and I'm still going to do this thing that scares me. And I do that all the time. And I do think, we get quicker at it because fear, that's why I like to talk about quieting the noise. I don't think, like, for me personally, fear doesn't go away. It lives in my body. It's in my hair, but she's not the boss of me anymore. And I think that's the bigger thing for me is, like, because I think fear is a messenger too. And another beautiful thing is, like, shame can come in when we think, why am I like this? Like, it's like, you know what? Your body is beautiful. Your body and your brain are working together to protect you. These are protective mechanisms at work. They're not here to harm you. The work is to, do all the healing work you need to do, the whatever, to help quiet the noise in your nervous system, in your brain, whatever, so that you're not on high alert. And then also you learn how the strategies to help you feel it, identify it, listen to the fear, the message underneath, and then still keep building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so this has already been really good, but let's see if we can just end on one, not kind of theoretical or whatever, but let's say one tiny practical action that somebody could take starting today or this week to start just learning how to move through fear, or to show up afraid in life, or to show up, and to fully to life. So I'll start. I'll give one favorite exercise that you guys will know. And mine will be my 3-2-1 exercise. I do this myself every single night. I've done it for many, many years. I do it when life feels bright and shiny, and when life feels horrible and painful. It keeps me anchored and showing up as the woman that I want to be in the world. So the 3-2-1 exercise basically is, and I just do this in my brain, in my head at night. I take a couple deep breaths. I'm preparing for sleep. You could do this in a journal, but the 3 is, I just think, what are 3 things I'm grateful for today? And I just list them off. What are 2 things I did well today? This is the harder point for most women I work with, and most men find this hard too, but like my experience is primarily with women. So most clients I've worked with, this is the harder part. 2 things I've done well today. Sometimes I can list that off in 20 seconds. Sometimes I lay there for 20 minutes saying, Krista, nope, you don't get out of this. You did do well today. What are those things? And then the 1 is, what's one thing I could do differently next time? And so it's not about judgment or criticism. It's about a growth mindset. It's about realizing I always have power of choice and I'm in progress. So as an example, let's say my teenager was kind of grouchy with me and I bit, I might think about that and think, if that wasn't the response I want, or the way of navigating this relationship that I want, what could I do differently next time? So I might think about a very practical thing. I might think, oh yeah, I got triggered because what I was hearing is you're not a good mom. So what could I do in that moment? So you rehearse a practical thing that you could do so that it's in the brain, a seed is planted. So next time you encounter a similar scenario, you already kind of have an idea. So 3-2-1, I love it. I highly, highly recommend it. Who would like to go next?
I will.
Sure.
The Post-it note. Taking and only putting maybe 3 things on the Post-it note to do, and that's it. Very general. And my husband wants to go, how big of a Post-it note? They have them big enough to go on bulletin boards. And it's like, no, a regular size Post-it note. And the same thing also with the mini Post-it notes, the 1x1 square, of taking and writing what and who is most important to you. And if you can't fit it in the 1x1 square, delete. So it's like, yes, I get it. So being a office supply junkie, the Post-it note thing really stuck with me.
Nice. So 3 priorities for the day, let that be enough, and celebrate that. And sometimes I can't, even right now, I 1 or 2 priorities. So for me this morning, I always set my top 3 priorities in the morning. And today they were this call and go for a walk. That's it. Those are my priorities for the day. I'm sure I will, do other things. Of course, I'm going to eat, but I even this morning, I was like 3 is too many for me. So yeah. And then Deb, for people listening, Deb mentioned Brene Brown came up with that idea, the 1x1 inch square. So it's like, whose opinion really matters? Like, whose voice are you listening to? And make sure your own voice is on that little 1x1 inch piece of paper, like that your opinion, right? Like, so Sandra or Katrina?
I can go. I love the 3 things on the Post-it note thing. I mean, that really just saves the day all the time. So I appreciate the reminder. The thing that I was thinking about is I think I'm working on like internal self-talk, and the RAIN by Tara Brach framework that you've shared, Krista, is really, really helpful. Whether it's, oftentimes I'll do it as a meditation, but I think you can write it as well. And it helps me kind of move through, you know, instead of going through the same thought over and over again. It helps me move through the thought, okay, so this thing happened and this is the story I'm telling about it. Why am I telling that story? Kind of allow myself to sit with it. And then I think the nourishing part, something I read or listened to from her lately, she was talking about like really kind of reveling in the nourishing part, like kind of like sticking with it for a while, because it takes a while for that to set in, I think, especially in the early points. And I just find it really helpful.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Katrina, so when you're talking about the nourishing, I think what you're referring to, and just to make sure that other people know, you're talking about even just sitting there with the good stuff too, right? Like how we all,
Yeah.
like one part is like we can learn to sit with fear or pain or grief or whatever, but we also equally need, and maybe even more, need to learn, because it's not instinctive, to sit with joy and calm and loving kindness.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So Tara Brach is wise and offers so many beautiful resources, and the RAIN practice, you can just Google that, whoever's listening, it'll pop up for you, or just Google Tara Brach, and she has really, like, she has a podcast, like lots of really, really good tools that you can access for free. So yeah, or you can buy her books. And Sandra, let's close with you.
A concept that was seminal to me at the beginning of my journey, but was new because I grew up in the no pain, no gain, very type A, push it. So I had no concept I had no idea about this concept, which I learned is actually called titration. It's like the fact that you don't have to sit there and suffer through it. You can actually give yourself permission. But at the beginning of my journey, what I learned first was this is it's what Pema Chodron calls the warrior's journey. And it's really simple. It's if you could sit with the hot loneliness, so like the discomfort and the, I need to be gone, for 1.5 seconds yesterday, and could sit with it for 2 seconds today, that is the warrior's journey. And so that is, it's like teensy, but it has gotten me through yoga classes. It has gotten me through, as I learned to like not just turn off all my sensors and suffer through it, be like, okay, I can feel this for 5 seconds today. It's kind of like holding your breath, and you just build up. And I've been working with the somatic experiencing therapist, and she reiterated, she's like, she'll just be like, okay, that's enough of that one, let it go. And I'm like, what? But it's that same concept of we're allowed to hold the hard work. So this is kind of in response to this is hard work. And if we can do it, we don't have to do it for 3 days. We don't have to like go off into the desert and spend 30 days and if I can, seconds. So
Thank you.
that's my.
Thank you guys so much. Sandra, so one of the things, so you sort of grin and bear it, suffer through, like this is a mark of strength and all of that. I love the warrior's journey. So I'm not actually familiar with that, but just like the way that you expressed it. And it made me think of my tattoo. You won't really, see it, like which reminds me of it. I got it after my son ended his life, and it reminds me to show up brave every day. And really, what does brave mean for me? Sometimes it means reminding myself, I can do this. I have the strength required to feel this, because the alternative is drink 8 bottles of wine tonight.
Yep.
So for me, like I was an expert number. Like, so the way that I you know, I had some other tools like perfectionism and stuff, but I would use sex, drugs, food, TV, like almost I tried all the things to numb because I did not believe I had the ability. I didn't have what it took to feel, to be here in this world. So for me, it's been a journey of learning to actually, I do have what it takes to be in this world, and I'm needed in this world. And so that learning how to feel that. Can I feel it for 30 minutes today, 30 seconds? Can I just be here? You know, just.
Yeah. Well, so this is one of Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist teacher. It's her concept, but I was reintroduced to it in Glennon Doyle's first book, Love War. Is it Love Warrior came first, or I don't remember, but it's in her first, and she talks about the hot yoga class she took. And so she went into this class because she needed some yoga, and she was having a breakdown. And she was like, I didn't want to be in hot yoga. And she literally sat on her mat for the entire class. And when she was done, she was like, when the class let out, she dissolved into tears, and the teacher was like, well done. That is the warrior's journey. And so connecting those two, it's like, okay, if I just sit on my mat, you know, in child's pose and cry, that's the warrior's journey, because I showed up, I'm here, I'm on the mat. Yeah, it's powerful.
And then just another thing, I think I don't want to end this call without at least mentioning this. Another, like the flip side of that is that you don't have to stay in the old patterns. Like, right. So one example would be like I used to, and I know this is really, really common. I remember I would allow these stories, like things that hadn't happened, but I would play out these scenarios like about something that could happen. So let's say maybe, I don't know, maybe I had some frustration or tension with somebody else, and I'd start creating imaginary scenarios, and they'd play out, and my emotions would be impacted, my mood was impacted. It was all just make-believe, but it was running in my head. And I actually had to learn, and this sounds so obvious today, but it's not obvious to people. Do you know that you can actually cut that thought off? As soon as that puppy starts playing out in your brain, you can say, stop, not doing it. It's hard work, but you can do that too. So it's interesting, like even as we learn to live fully alive by sitting in discomfort or whatever's up, we can also learn to not sit with these things that are actually just pulling us down. The replaying of stories, the tipping into rumination or into worry about the future. We can also learn to halt, you know? Anyway, I felt like that was really important to say too, because people may not actually be there yet. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Deb and Sandra and Katrina. And I really hope that this just offers support to other people like ourselves who are just here practicing and choosing or saying yes to life in the fullness of what that means and looks and sounds like in this season. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.